I'm Jacob Kruger, and this is the Write Your Screenplay podcast. On this podcast, rather than criticizing movies 2 thumbs up or 2 thumbs down, we talk about what we can learn from them as screenwriters. And along the way, we learn the skills that we need not only to become better writers, but to live better lives as artists. This episode is our 3rd installment of our Adolescence series, where we're looking at the brilliant Netflix limited series Adolescence by Stephen Graham and Jack Thorne. And we have been talking about so many different screenwriting ideas. We've been talking about the first and last image of episodes. We've been talking about the concept of engine and how it's used to make each episode feel both the same but also different. And then we get to episode 3, and what the hell is happening? Right? Suddenly, it seems like Adolescence has totally broken its engine. We're not dealing with any of our main characters anymore, except for Jamie. We're not dealing with D.I. Bascom. We're not dealing with D.S. Frank. We're not dealing with Eddie, Jamie's dad. Suddenly, we are in a completely different world. We've been in this world of fathers and sons, as we've been discussing. And then suddenly, in episode 3, we're in a different world, where it's therapist and child. We talked at the end of episode 2 about the brilliant way that these oneers are shot. Each episode is a oneer where there is literally no cutting between the shots. And we talked at the end of episode 2, this incredible crane shot, which we don't usually see in a oneer, where suddenly we're up over the school and we're seeing Dad, Eddie, make his offering at the site where people are leaving flowers for this murdered child. We talked about the way that the camera work is designed to create this incredible scope. And then suddenly in episode 3, we are inside. We are, for the most part, inside one room. And for the entire episode, we are inside of one location. And so this is a real change. In fact, you could argue that episode 3 of Adolescence is built more like a play than like the average TV show or movie. So we have all these radical changes. And yet it still frickin' works. So we're going to be talking about today, how did Adolescence do all this without breaking their engine? And it comes down to one really simple and also really complicated idea, which is called pattern matching. See, normally in most TV shows, engine is built through character, right? A certain character playing a certain role that creates a certain feeling and certain kinds of things, episode after episode after episode. But in an episode like episode 3 of Adolescence, the mode that is used to create or recreate the engine is not character, but rather pattern. And so we're going to be discussing today how exactly that worked and how you can apply that to your own TV writing. Now, before we get into that, I want to talk about one of the coolest programs that we have at Jacob Kruger Studio called Thursday Night Writes. Thursday Night Writes is a free class. That's right, free, live online, taught by me and the finest teachers on my faculty. It's a community of hundreds of students throughout the world. We get together every Thursday night, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, for about an hour. Each episode, I or one of my incredible faculty members teach a different screenwriting concept, followed by a writing exercise. And then after the class, we break you guys into breakout rooms so you can get to know the other writers in our community. It's 100% free, and it'll be one of the best screenwriting classes you ever take. So come join us. We also have a really cool new community that we launched as part of our Thursday Night Writes program that's also totally free, where you can communicate in between Thursday Night Writes with the people in our tribe. So come check it out, writeyourscreenplay.com/Thursday, and that's Thursday Night Writes. Okay, so back to Adolescence. One of the ideas that we talked about that's central to the engine, right? We've talked about this dialectic that was built in episode 2, right? This dialectic between, if we just look hard enough, we're going to find the truth. And you're never going to know the why, right? These two very different ideas that represent the wrestling inside of the audience as we try to make sense of a little boy who seems to have committed murder. We talked about the two different schools of thought among audience members, right? Some audience members who saw the video in episode 1 and said, this little boy did it. And others who saw the video in episode 1 who said, it sure looks like he did it, but maybe I'm missing something. Maybe it's Ryan. Maybe there's something the cops are missing. Maybe there's a twist. I've seen these kind of crime dramas before, right? So we've talked about these two different dialectics. This is a dialectic between the characters and also the dialectic inside the audience. Is it about a whodunit or is it about a why done it? But by the end of episode 2, it kind of seems, at least to a lot of us in the audience, like maybe we know the why, right? The why. The poor kid was getting bullied. No one was getting it. He was in this school that was a total mess. The kids were cruel to him. He was being tortured by this girl. And finally, maybe he snapped. He had a knife, Ryan's knife. It was given to him by Ryan. Maybe he just wanted to scare her, or maybe he planned to kill her, but one way or another, we've got a motive and things are starting to make sense. So what episode 2 does, the first way it replicates the pattern is again by poking a hole into that dialectic and going like, oh, you think you know why, but I bet you haven't thought of this. And we're going to talk about what this is in a moment. Now, the second pattern that we talked about in episode 2 is that in this show, in Adolescence, unlike in most shows, where we see the same characters week after week after week, and we're checking in with our entire cast week after week after week, because the engine of the show is generally built around the cast week after week after week. But in this show, certain characters that were major characters can disappear entirely. Some characters can disappear partially, and some characters can disappear and still be present. So in episode 2, mom and the sister disappear entirely. They are no longer part of the story. The lawyer disappears entirely. He is no longer part of the story. Eddie, the dad, disappears almost entirely until the very end. He disappears partially, right? At the very, very end, we come back and we check in with him. And we talked about how, in a way, this is a very similar model to what The Last of Us did in season 1, episode 3, when suddenly we broke away from what felt like our main storyline to discover a completely different one, only to, on the other side, catch back up with our main character and be back in our engine again. And Jamie disappears, but he's still present in almost every scene. And the way that works is that in almost every scene, they are talking about him, trying to understand him, trying to figure out his motivations, trying to figure out what was really going on with him, trying to figure out his why, to such an extent that D.S. Frank actually goes, why is it all about him and not about Katie, the girl who was killed? Why is it all about the perpetrator and not about the victim? With this really interesting way of keeping this character alive. And we also have a pattern established in episode 2 that new characters are going to come in. We have a bunch of interesting teacher characters. We have Ryan and his other friend, but really Ryan as a new major character. And we have Jade, who is Katie's best friend, who also plays a huge role in episode 2. So this is the first thing to understand when you're building engine. And again, this is not traditional engine building. Traditional engine building, if you look at a show like Dead to Me, if you look at a show like 30 Rock, if you look at a show like The Good Place, right? Every episode works the same way, right? If you're building The Good Place, every episode's a different philosophical concept. You're going to follow the same characters doing the same kind of things, right? Each episode works the same way. It's like a machine that always does the same thing with just slightly different inputs. This is a much more complicated way of building engine. So the first thing to understand is that your pilot sets the rules and your second episode sets the pattern. I'm going to say that again because it's really important to understand this. Your pilot sets the rules, and your second episode sets the pattern. In other words, the pilot tells us what kinds of things we should expect in this show. And the way the pilot and episode 2 speak to each other tell us, okay, this is how the show is going to work. And even though it's doing some non-traditional things, through episodes 1 and 2, Adolescence is functioning like a more complicated but traditional engine, right? We think we know who the main characters are. It looks like it's going to be D.I. Bascom and D.S. Frank that are going to carry us through it. We understand that they're going to be trying to understand the why. We understand that the why is going to be more complicated. We understand that other characters are going to be coming and going, right? We think and we understand that dad and his journey and dads and their journeys in relation to their children is going to be central to this. And finally, we are starting to tell ourselves that, oh, there's going to be an arc with D.I. Bascom and his child where maybe they can bridge this gap of understanding that exists between the two of them, right? These are the stories we're telling ourselves, which is why episode 3 is so whoa. So we start episode 3, and we are with a woman in a show that's about dads and sons. And she is a psychologist, and she's brought in, it's been 7 months, she's been brought in to find out, does Jamie, this 13-year-old boy, actually understand what death is? What he's been charged with, what the potential consequences are for him, and what the potential consequences were for the little girl that he was accused of murdering, right? She wants to understand his psychological state before he goes to trial, and that is her job. And we talked about in earlier episodes the idea of characters playing at the very top of their intelligence, and here is yet another character, right? This is as skillful as a psychotherapist who has ever walked into a room to evaluate a potential murderous 13-year-old, right? She is at the top of her game, and it's still frickin' hard. She is using every tool in her toolbook to connect with Jamie and help him feel cared about, but Jamie doesn't want to share with her, because he is afraid that she's actually there to get a confession out of him, to get him to implicate himself, to get him to mess up. And Brioni, who is the psychologist, she uses a really interesting tactic to try to get into Jamie's psychology. And that really interesting tactic also connects to that element we were talking about before, which is how do we keep a character alive in this show by talking about them, even if they're not present? And the character she brings back to life, even though he's not present, is Eddie, Jamie's dad. What she's doing is she's poking holes in Jamie, but she's also poking holes in our why. You see, at the end of episode 2, even though D.S. Frank was starting to poke holes in D.I. Bascom's point of view about the world, we had our motive. We knew why, kind of, right? This kid got bullied. He did something terrible. This girl was torturing him. We understand. But in this episode, we push way deeper. See, the psychologist keeps asking questions about Eddie. Now, this is also a pattern that was started in episode 1, right? This pattern of, what about the dad? Is the dad okay? He wants to be the responsible adult. Is the dad okay? Hey, this has gone wrong before where the dad was not okay, right? And we're playing the same game again in episode 3. What about the dad? Is the dad okay? Did Jamie's behavior grow out of his dad? Was his dad violent? Was his dad angry? Is his dad hiding something? Is there something more going on in this kid's past than just being bullied? What are his dad's point of view about women? What are his points of view about masculinity? How does this connect to toxic masculinity as an idea? Is it dad? Is it society? What made this happen? You can see this is just another, we thought we had a synthesis. That's the new thesis. Oh, what causes these kinds of terrible crimes? It's bullying. And then bang, you pop that up against a new antithesis through this psychologist who says, what if it's not just bullying? What if it's dad? What if it's psychology? What if it's society? What if it's toxic masculinity, right? And we get this really interesting, and I'm going to call it a play because it's really a play. It's literally in one room where we are watching her try to get to the truth, try to get to the why in Jamie. And we are watching Jamie try to protect himself and his father and his image of his father and his image of himself and his relationship with this psychologist, who's the only person with whom he has a connection in the world right now. So you can see the pattern getting matched of you thought you knew why, but you don't know why. And can we ever know why? And can Brioni know why? Is it just bullying or is it something more? Who is this kid for real? And of course, in the back of our minds, we have been wondering, is there something we don't know about Ryan? About Jade? Is there something the kids know that the cops are missing? Are we gonna get one of those crime story twists that we didn't see coming where we're like, oh my God, how did I miss that? Because we still want to believe this kid is innocent. But a really interesting thing happens as this episode progresses. Jamie accidentally confesses right about 33 minutes into this piece. He's been confronted by this psychologist again and again and again. He's gotten angry, he's blown up, and finally he kind of loses it on her. He tells her the other psychologist was much easier. When he tried to figure out if I knew what I did, it was much easier, right? We understand that she's actually started to poke a hole in his defenses. And he accidentally says, do I understand my understanding of your understanding? I understand what I did. And then he realizes, because see, he's also playing at the top of his intelligence. And that's what makes this scene so freaking good. Right, is that we have two equally matched characters, and one of them is a 13-year-old boy. And they are both playing at the very top of their intelligence. He is trying to protect his truth. He is trying to protect his father. He is trying to protect his relationships. He is trying to protect his psychology. She is trying to understand the why. She is trying to break through. She is trying to get to what is real inside of him. He realizes that he has confessed. And suddenly he turns on her. And suddenly we kind of know he did it. Suddenly we see the anger. We see the potential violence in this boy. We see the misogyny. We see the anger towards women. We see what he does when cornered. And we see that he's confessed. The writers then make a really interesting choice on the other side of that, which is that she doesn't decide she's got what she needs in this accidental confession. She keeps going with him. She has to escape for a moment to get a breath, because it's as scary for her as it is for us to see this other side of this boy. And as she continues to push him, he confesses again and again, not on purpose. Under the incredible pressure of her psychological poking, her trying to get to what's real. We see again, in an even bigger way, how terrifying this kid is. And then we get this other really interesting pattern match, which brings us all the way back to episode 1. So if you remember in episode 1, throughout the entire episode, Dad, Eddie, has been on his son's side. He has known no matter what they're saying, his son told him he didn't do this. And he trusts his son, and he knows, and the core of that relationship is their connection. And through all of this, what we have seen is Brioni, this psychologist, put the same kind of faith in him, even as she pokes at him, trying to get to the truth. When the guards have come in and said, hey, does he need to be taken away? She says, no, there's not a problem, right? Even after he accidentally confesses, she still comes back and gives him the benefit of the doubt. She still wants to make absolutely sure she's got the truth. And over the course of it, she builds this beautiful relationship with him where we can see that despite all the horrible things he is saying to her and doing towards her, that he loves her and needs her and is desperate for her connection. If you remember at the end of episode 1, Dad sees the truth of him. After watching the video, and the boy reaches out for comfort, Jamie reaches out for comfort, and Dad turns away. And it's devastating to watch the comfort be removed from this child, even having seen him brutally murder another child. Well, this episode plays the exact same game. We have seen nothing but warmth and kindness, generosity of spirit between Brioni and Jamie. But then Brioni gets what she needs. She knows that he understands what death is. She knows that the violence in him is real. She knows, and we know, that he did it. And she knows that he gets that he did it. And she ends the interview. But what's devastating is not the answer. What's devastating is watching her psychologically pull away from him, is watching him beg her to come back, is watching him ask her, Jamie ask her, this little 13-year-old boy, do you even like me? Do you like me at all? And we start to realize we still don't know the why. Was it being picked on? Was it Dad and what was modeled for him? Was it the misogyny of our society? The toxic masculinity in which he was brought up? Was it vengeance? Or did he just want her to like him? Like he wants Brioni to like him. Right? So we know even less why. But we get the same devastating moment where the only connection he has emotionally, the only safe place he has, is taken away. because she will not answer. Suddenly she goes into her professional demeanor. Suddenly there is a wall between them that did not exist before, and it is devastating to watch. It's devastating, even though we know that this little boy killed a little girl with a knife by stabbing her multiple times, even though we know that this little boy is not only smart and not only knowing and not only capable, but that this little boy contains inside of himself an ugliness that we never imagined he could contain, that we have seen him do to Brioni, who he obviously cares about and needs. Some psychologically terrifying stuff. We have watched him turn on a dime, and still our heart breaks for him, just like it did in episode 1. He's brought out of the room, and we watch Brioni, who we've seen go cold, suddenly have to breathe, have to get herself calm, and we start to realize how scared she was, how emotionally overwhelmed she was, how brutally hard for her this was, right? And this again is just a mirror. In the first episode, dad then hugs the child, and we get it that way. In this episode, it happens separately. One of the really beautiful things about being a screenwriter, right, is that our job is empathy. Our job is being able to step into a character like Jamie, a character who is capable of cold-blooded murder of another child, who is capable of psychological abuse towards an adult who is trying to help him, is stepping into a child like that and being able to feel empathy, to see him as a human being, to let our hearts break for him. Our job as a writer is to step into a woman like Brioni, the psychotherapist, who maybe we even judged a little for going cold on this boy who needs him. And then to find the humanity in her, the part of her that is devastated, the part of her that is scared, the part of her that barely pulled this off despite the extraordinary competence and composure, right? To basically go deep inside and pull out the parts of these characters that they are hiding from themselves and others, right? To get underneath the mask, whether the mask is beautiful or ugly, to see the humanity underneath, right? This is our job as writers. And when we do our job right, we not only build extraordinarily compelling shows and movies like Adolescence, we also increase the empathy of everyone around us. We also increase the empathy in the world. And if there is one thing the world needs right now, as far as I'm concerned, it is more empathy, right? So we have a responsibility. We are important. If you write a character and you lose empathy for them, it means you are not doing your job fully. Can you get mad at your characters? Yeah. Can you get disgusted by your characters? Yeah. Can you get turned off by your characters? Yeah. Can you fall out of love with your characters? Yes. But it is your job to go back inside and get under that judgment and find the humanity. If you write a mustache-twirling villain, fine. It is your job to get back under that mustache-twirling villain and find the humanity. And if you write a superhero who has no problems, no flaws, it is your job to get under that perfection and find the humanity, right? Your job is to find the humanity for your characters, to find empathy for people who do things, even if you find them despicable, to find the humanness and to allow that humanness to spread. Because this not only builds better movies, but it builds a better world. Now let's bring this all the way back to the concept of engine. So I promised you that I would teach you how pattern matching works, and you can see the beginning of it already. In some shows, rather than building the engine off of the characters, and therefore needing to continue the characters' journeys through the entire series, In some shows, and these are very rare shows, the engine is built through the pattern by allowing other characters to step into the role that a character did in a previous episode, right? This can happen in an anthology series like The Twilight Zone, where every episode is different, or high maintenance, where the engine is not the characters but the patterns. And this can happen in a dramatic series like Adolescence, where the characters are not actually the engine. We are not going to see D.I. Bascom and D.S. Frank again, despite how fascinating they are as characters. We are never going to find out how Bascom's relationship with his son Adam progressed. It is over. It is done. He is no longer part of this story. But the patterns are being replicated. The patterns of can you know the why? The patterns of is dad okay? The patterns of talking about a character who is not present in order to keep them alive. The patterns of new characters coming in, taking a huge role just for one episode in order to deepen and complicate the theme. The pattern of a dialectic, right, between two opposing ideas that are controlled by the theme. If you want to look at one of the greatest examples ever of this kind of pattern matching, you can look at The Wire. So The Wire was a really interesting show, right? The Wire was really the first show to kill off all of its characters somewhere towards the end of every season. And all of its characters are a little bit exaggerated, but most of its characters, right? So the way The Wire worked, right, is you would watch two characters, one on the side of, quote, crime, and one on the side of, quote, polite society, right? Acceptable society. And both characters would be out-of-the-box thinkers, people of revolutionary ideas. And what you would watch over the first season, even though one was in crime and one was in acceptable society, right, and they were often pitted at odds with each other, what you watch over each season is for the first half of the season, you would watch their out-of-the-box thinking revolutionize their world, actually change the world for the better. And in the second half of the season, you would watch the pressure of the man, the pressure of people who do not think broadly, the pressure of people who play by the rules and want to keep things the way they are, the pressure of inertia and bureaucracy. You would watch it crush these new ideas. And by the end of the season, there would be a total bloodbath. They would kill off half of their characters, including characters that were central to the engine or seemed like they were. And then in the next season, they'd find a new location. So in season 1, for example, we are in the world of the drug wars in Baltimore. In season 2, we go to the docks. We find two characters, one on the side of crime and one on the side of acceptable society. They're both out-of-the-box thinkers. They revolutionize their world. The forces of the man push them down. The forces of compromise destroy them. There's a bloodbath. Repeat season 3. Repeat season 4. You can do it forever. Because instead of having characters driving the engine, you're having the roles the character play drive the engine. The question at the center of The Wire is, why can't Baltimore get its shit together? And in exploring that question, we look at what could change Baltimore, and then we look at why it doesn't change. And even though we're doing it with different characters every season, we're doing the same thing every season. In this show, it's actually the same approach. In Adolescence, right, the question is, can you ever know why? What is the relationship between fathers and sons in our society? And can we ever understand the societal factors that make this kind of violence happen among children, right? That is the question that the piece is asking. It is going to bang up a dialectical idea. Characters are going to come and go, but each character is going to play the same role of poking at that why. That every time you think you understand it, you're going to be left back in doubt and realizing it's more complicated than you thought. And we can also repeat this pattern again and again of a little boy needing something and not getting it. In episode 2, it's Jade needing something and not getting it. And the flip of that, Adam, D.I. Bascom's son, needing something and not getting all of it, but getting a little piece of it, right? There's this question of understanding that is woven through all of it, and it's that pattern that's getting matched episode after episode after episode. There's the concept of the oneer, and even though the oneer is changing, right, the oneer is being used episode after episode after episode to look at that question from the broad sweeping scope of the earlier episode to the compressed trapped world, but it's always doing the same thing, right? So if you remember episode 3, the camera spends the whole episode basically twirling around these two people, showing us one face and hiding the other, right? And again, so the camera is replicating that pattern of what can you see, what can you not see, what can you understand, what can you not understand. It is way easier to build an engine out of character than out of pattern matching, because in our lives are the patterns of our lives, the thing that makes our life feel the same episode after episode, day after day, even as we try different things, is the people in our lives. You change the people at your table and suddenly your table is going to feel different and your life is going to feel different. Good lesson to take there as an artist, right? If you don't like the way life is, the fastest way to change it is to change the people at your table. And suddenly your life is going to be very different because engine always grows out of cast. But if you cannot change the people at your table, or if the people at your table are constantly changing, you can also build consistency of feeling through patterns, right? By asking, what are the patterns that I need if I want to be an artist? What are the patterns that I need to replicate? Right? If I want to feel good about myself, what are the patterns that I need to replicate? If I want my life to feel this way, yes, I can surround myself with characters that help my life feel this way, or I can mirror specific patterns that will help my life feel this way, right? The same way we live our lives is the way that we build patterns for our TV shows. So I hope that this podcast is going to help not only your screenwriting, but also your life. If you are getting a lot out of it, please follow us wherever you get your podcast. Please share your reviews. They mean so much to us. Come join us for Thursday Night Writes, and stay tuned for the last episode, episode 4 of Adolescence, coming to you in 2 weeks.